So something that every preacher deals with is this tension of feeling like they've lost engagement from their listeners. Like the question I get very often from subscribers is they'll write and they'll say, I just want to know, how do I keep my listeners engaged? How do I keep them attracted to the message? How do I keep them involved and engaged in what I'm doing? And this is common for us to struggle with this. And for those of us who don't, it's because we don't realize how important this issue is. I mean, this is a big deal that a lot of pastors, no matter how skilled, have to be very intentional about keeping people engaged in the process. So in this video, I want to talk about the challenges of engagement, like what keeps people from being engaged with us and our messages. And then I want to give you three very practical, very simple, but practical and effective things that you can do to keep people engaged in your messages. That's what we're going to do in this video. I hope you're ready. Be sure to subscribe. My name is Lane. This is Preaching Donkey. I love helping preachers preach life-changing messages because I think that we have the most important message in the world, the gospel, and so I want to make sure that it's heard. So I make videos on sermon prep, sermon delivery, and church leadership. So if you're new, definitely subscribe because you're going to want to not miss anything that we're doing, and be sure to share this video with friends of yours. All right, so let's dig in to this. What are the challenges that surround engagement? The first challenge is that we as preachers tend to assume too much. We assume that people are listening maybe when they're not. We assume that people are going to be engaged and locked in and invested in our message because we are. We spent the time, we studied, we prepared. They came to church that day or they watched online that day, whatever the case, and they don't have anywhere near the same enthusiasm for our message that we do. We're the ones who wrote it. We're the ones who poured over it. We're the ones who put our blood, sweat, and tears into it. They just showed up and sat down. That doesn't mean they're bad people, and that doesn't mean we're great people. It just means that's the reality, right? So we have to work within these limitations that we can't assume that because we're standing up there, opening up a Bible and saying, "Thus saith the Lord," that people are going to be like, "All right, let's hear it," you know? That's awesome for the people who are, and there are people like that in our churches, and that's amazing, but not everybody is. So we never want to assume that people are engaged just because we are and just because we put a lot into the message. When we assume, we really lose out because we kind of leave people behind that aren't quite there yet. The second challenge with engagement is a lot of times just a lack of dynamic in the message. Now, this could be a lot of different ways that we lack dynamic. It could be in our tonality, where we are a monotone speaker, where it's true lack of dynamics, where we literally just speak in the same volume at the same time, the whole message, and people start to hear it as if it's just noise. Or maybe it's a lack of dynamic where we lack energy. There's not any kind of punch to the message. We're not reaching out and kind of grabbing people and pulling them in. We're just kind of letting them sit passively. We're presenting passively, and we lack dynamic in that way. Sometimes we lack dynamic by only having one mode of teaching. So in other words, maybe we're only giving propositional truth. We just read the text and say what it means. Read the text and say what it means. And we lack illustration, we lack application, we lack story, we lack tension. Those kind of things, if they're lacking, if that dynamic is lacking, then people lose interest. When there's a change up, people pay attention. So if there's a lack of dynamics, people can lose interest. Later in this video, I'm going to talk about how to re-engage people by making your sermon more dynamic, but the lack of dynamics is one of the main reasons why we lose engagement. And then finally, number three, and this goes back to number one, but we assume too much on the other way. So the first thing I said is we assume that people are listening when they're not. We assume that they're engaged when they're not. But we also assume that people aren't engaged when they are. So sometimes as a preacher, we might think, hey, this is like a seminary lesson. These people aren't involved in this. Maybe if we're getting really deep into something, we just think nobody's going to care. And the thing is, there are people who will. And when we bring this energy of, okay, we're just going to get through this together because I'm committed to preach this, and so here we go. We assume that people aren't paying attention and aren't interested and won't be, and maybe we're missing out on people who really are eager and hungry for the Word of God. And so we've got to bring with ourselves a sense of eagerness and bring people along with us. So that first assumption we made, that they're paying attention when they're not, can be just as bad as assuming that they're not paying attention when they are. But what we bring to the table is still the same. We bring the energy and we bring the eagerness and we bring the enthusiasm no matter what. We don't assume that people are or are not listening. So those are the three main challenges that we have surrounding engagement or the lack of engagement. I want to give you three practical things, and I told you these were going to be practical and simple, but these are ways that you can regain engagement. If you're assuming the right things, okay, you're assuming that some are paying attention and some aren't, and that's okay, but you're bringing the best of your energy. Here's how you can get back some of that dynamic. Here's how you can get back some of that sense of, oh, there's something going on up there. I need to be paying attention to it. That's what you want. The first thing is, this is incredibly simple, ask more questions. So much of our sermons are telling. We're telling people what to think. We're telling people what the Bible says. We're telling people what to believe. We're telling people what application step to take. And if we just flip that and we asked questions, hey, what would you think about this? Or what do you think Paul means when he says this? Or why would Jesus ask these people to do this? Or why would he say that? Or why would God be this way? Or what do you think? Have you ever? Do you think? We're asking people and we're drawing them out, even if they're rhetorical questions and we don't expect an answer, just by simply asking people questions all throughout the message. Anytime you can take something that would normally be a statement and phrase it as a question, even if it's at first, even if eventually you're going to come back around and give the answer, if you can phrase it as a question, what that does is it builds intrigue. People go, oh, he wants to know what I think. Okay, what do I think about that? And people are kind of forced to wrestle with what they think about something rather than just hearing you say what to think. And that's a very powerful thing. The second thing is tell more stories, okay? If you want dynamics in your message, if you want to increase engagement, there's nothing like stories. And your stories, they need to be intentional, they need to illustrate points. But if you look at some of the best speakers, not preachers, but the best speakers who just make the circuit and they speak, one of the things that they do, if you go to any conference, the best, most skilled speakers, their scripts are very simple. Tell a story, make a point. Tell a story, make another point. Tell another story, make another point. Done, all right? Tell a story, make a point, tell a story, make a point, tell a story, make a point. Now, when in preaching, there's got to be more to it than that. You've got to explain the text. There's things that come with preaching that go beyond just tell a story, make a point. But look at what Jesus did. What Jesus did is he would tell a story or a parable and he'd make a point. And sometimes the point was confusing, right? But he would tell a story, make a point, tell a story, make a point. And guess what else he did? He asked questions. So he would ask questions, tell stories, make points. Ask questions, tell stories, make points. Ask questions, tell a story, don't even make a point. Tell a story, don't ask a question, don't make a point. You see what I'm saying? Like there was a lot of dynamic to what Jesus did. And so you can take those principles and you can use them where it's not always just think this, believe this, do this, thus saith the Lord, here's what the text says, but you're asking questions to increase that sense of curiosity. You're telling stories because people pay attention to stories. It just is. If you're losing your audience, if you're looking out and all of them are like this, right? They're just texting, okay? And you want them to look up and pay attention, all you have to do is say, there once was a man. Huh? Who? What did he do? Is he okay? What happened to him, right? No one wants to miss a story. They will put their phone away just to hear a story. And in that moment, you have their attention. You have their engagement. So ask more questions, tell more stories. Number 3, build more tension. Build more tension. So often when we preach, we just want to relieve all the tension. We want to say, hey, this might be tough, but here's the way to think about it, right? Or here's a question we can't answer because we don't really know, but here's the 3 answers that are acceptable. Or, wow, this text might seem on the surface really tough, but let me explain to you why it's not as hard to understand as you think, or it's not as hard to stomach as you think, right? And we blow through what could be incredible tension that would engage people and keep them locked into the message. right? We blow through it because we think, no, that we want to resolve the tension, right? It's making people uncomfortable. That's okay. Let people be uncomfortable. Ask the questions, tell the stories, build the tension. And what will happen is you'll start to realize that people are more engaged in your messages. Why? Because there's a dynamic, right? You're not assuming that just because they're there, they're paying attention. You're not assuming that just because they're there, they're not paying attention. You are presenting to them in an eager, curious, fun, exciting, dynamic, powerful, spiritual, authoritative way the truth of God, right? That's what produces an engaging message. When you're asking questions and you're building tension and you're telling stories that all tie into your bottom line and all relate to your point, that's a powerful thing. So if you want engaging messages, I know that those 3 things are simple. They might seem a little bit too simple or pedantic. I'm telling you, they work. You don't have to make this complicated. They work. So try those 3 things in your next sermon. Let me know how it goes. Let me know in the comments, what do you do to keep people engaged when you feel like you might be losing your people? How do you keep them engaged in what you're doing? And if you want more help along these lines, definitely check out my 21-day guide to creating killer sermons. I made it just for you. It's totally free. It will help you prepare and deliver a really effective message. Go to preachingdonkey.com/21 days to pick yours up there, and I will see you in the next video.